Do this. Let me go ahead and do a couple of things. One, couple different clarifications real quick, and we'll kind of get on our way. First of all, I want to share my screen so you can see it. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a few different things, but I did buy my first house in 2008, but I actually didn't make that full-time leap until 2014. And that was simply because I was in the financial software space. And I went into work one day and they said, "Hey, you don't work here anymore." And I was like, perfect. That's what I wanted to hear today. And so I got to go home and have that whole conversation with my wife. I had a son at the time. My wife was pregnant at the time. I was the only income earner. And so I had to figure something out, right? And I ultimately decided, hey, let's jump into this real estate thing full time. This is working out. And let's just, take a stab at it and really never look back. And I did. I started as a wholesaler. And as you'll kind of hear throughout the story, I started just trying other strategies. Oh, maybe this is something I call it shiny object syndrome because I'm easily distracted. Somebody says, "Oh, you got to try this thing. It's awesome. It makes money." I'm like, "Okay, let's try it." Right. And you get some leads in and you say, "All right, I'll give it a go." Right. And then that was kind of the beginning of my journey, and I've basically been wholesaling and buying houses ever since, until here in the last 2-3 years, when really I've separated myself more away from the house side of the world and more towards the paper side of the business, which is what we'll talk about a little bit. But how we got connected, how I ended up getting connected with Noteschool, so you have a little bit better understanding, is in 2016. I was at my local RIA here in the Dallas, Texas area, and there was this man. He was speaking about creative financing, owner financing, notes, building wealth, building retirement, showing all kinds of big fancy numbers. And it was very interesting. I will say it was fascinating and it was very impressive. But what I heard in that meeting was, this is how you retire. And I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, but I got 2 kids to feed and I got a mortgage and my wife and all this stuff. Like, I need to make money now. Like, I don't have time for retirement yet. I need to be focusing on how do I make some money right now. And for whatever reason, that was kind of what I took away from that event. And when I actually ran into this gentleman at the end of the night, he asked me what I did. And I was like, well, I'm a wholesaler. And he said, oh, interesting. Well, if you're a wholesaler, you should really consider adding creative financing to your acquisition model. It will radically change your business. Now, if you haven't figured it out already, the man that I ran into, or that was speaking at that event, was none other than Eddie Speed that you see on the screen. He is the founder of Noteschool. And this was in 2016. So I'd only been in business about 2 years. And when he was telling me I need to add something to my business, for those of you who have been buying and selling houses or been in the business for a while, 2014, 15, 16, those were very favorable years for a real estate investor, especially compared to today, right? It was a lot easier to get leads. It was a lot easier to get buyers. Well, I guess there's buyers everywhere now, but this was the beginning of the conversation for me. And the reality boiled down to the fact that I didn't feel like I needed any sort of, I'd say, real change in my business, because in 2 years into business full time, I had really grown my buyers list. Our marketing was scaling as fast as we could. And so here's this guy telling me I need to change. And I didn't feel like I needed to change anything because it seemed to be working at the moment. Well, all that changed about 2 years later in 2018, when all of a sudden our marketing dollars, we were getting a lower response rate, meaning we were sending marketing out and less people were calling in, right? Which means we were setting less appointments, making less offers, ultimately doing less deals, making less money. And there was this aha moment of like, okay, we got to start trying everything. So we changed it from a pink postcard to a yellow postcard, and then a handwritten letter. And then we did cold calls, and then we did texting. We kept trying all these different things. And for whatever reason, I stumbled across some paperwork when I was cleaning out my office. And that's where I saw the Noteschool stuff. And that's when I was like, I need to reconnect with this Eddie Speed guy. He probably knows something that I don't know. And here's what you got to understand about Noteschool, just so you have a little bit better understanding. There's 2 things I always like to tell people about Noteschool. Eddie Speed has been in business for 40 years. And he's done over 50,000 deals. Now, had I been paying attention at the RIA that night, I probably would have caught that at the beginning and maybe taking some of his advice a little bit more seriously, because it took me a couple of years to figure that hard lesson out. But ultimately, I got re-engaged with him in 2018, kind of started learning this a lot more, implemented it right into my business. And at the beginning of 2020, he actually asked me to join his teaching team to simply, hey, spread the news of creative financing and notes, and really how it shifted a wholesaler's business into something a little bit different. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about really what I consider to be the biggest need in the marketplace right now, which is, as we all just heard a second ago on the haves and wants, it's finding a solid deal. How do I find a solid deal right now when everybody wants just absolutely ridiculous things, right? They want $1 million for a house that you thought was $300,000 just a couple of years ago, right? So we're kind of going to talk about that because Noteschool has really cracked the code on creative financing, and creative financing is probably the number one tool you basically have to not just survive in this environment, but to really thrive in this environment. We'll talk a little bit about that, creating our own notes, and kind of go from there. But before we do that, what I thought I would do is I thought I would walk you through a couple of different things, really what we call the niches in the note business. And I'm going to show you how I became what Eddie calls a deal architect. The deal architect is simply a specialist real estate investor who simply wants more out of their marketing dollars. They want more out of the deals that they're doing. They want to make profit, but they also want cash flow on top of that. A whole bunch of different things, as you'll kind of see. And we'll kind of go through that tonight. My objective tonight is to really, this is, I would say, part one of a two-part series, right? So I'm going to spend an hour and a half kind of going through some of this content. And then, like Grace said, we've got this one-day class this Saturday. That is 9 a.m. Pacific time. I'll tell you about it at the end too. That's where I actually have a whole day to get into more details, obviously use some case studies to kind of show some more things. But I'll try to get as much as I possibly can in the next 90 minutes. So you got it, and we'll go from there. But this is what we call the 6 biggest niches in the note business. And a note is simply a promise to pay, right? Somebody owes somebody else something. A mortgage is a note, right? And really what we're talking about when we talk about the niches in the note business are these things right here. First of all, it's buying houses on terms or buying houses with creative financing. What would that look like if I could get the seller to play the role of the bank, where I buy their house, but they also finance it for me? Right, we're going to talk a little bit about this and really why this is probably the number one solution for anybody looking to buy houses right now, right? So we'll get into that a little bit. But if I'm buying a house with terms, right, I'm buying the house and they're providing the bank instead of using maybe a lender of some kind or a bank of some kind. If I now have the house and the funding, what can I do with that asset? Well, whatever I was going to do with it, right? Maybe you're going to flip it. Maybe you were going to rent it. Maybe you were going to, I don't know, turn into an Airbnb or wholesaler or whatever your thing is. The bottom line is you can do whatever you want with it, right? One of the things that we teach is to say, hey, look, why don't you turn right around after acquiring it and resell it to somebody using the same strategy, seller financing. And we're going to talk about why there's a massive benefit to seller financing, not just from the profit side of things, but also the tax advantages that come with seller financing as well. Eddie, like I said, he's been around for 40 years. He actually, if anybody's a Home Investors franchisee or one, Eddie wrote all of the seller financing curriculum for all of the Home Investors franchises back in the early 90s. We still have about 15 franchisees that come through Noteschool pretty much every year to learn really the other sides of the business. And so this is what it looks like to buy houses, resell them on terms, which allows us to create our own note, right? And that's really kind of the underlying theme when we're talking about the niches in the note business, is to create our note to be the bank. You can even start in the note business, right? Whether you want to be a part of the house side of the business or not, you can actually start wholesaling notes, which is essentially wholesaling mortgages, right? Just like you would wholesale a house. You could buy a note at cheap and you could sell it for a little bit more. You buy low and you sell low. This is how Eddie started at 20 years old. He started buying and selling mortgages and wholesaling them for a fee, right? And then there's, as I heard during the haves and wants, there's a whole bunch of people who said, Brian, don't make me work. I'm interested in the passive side of life. There's just not enough hours in the day, as somebody mentioned. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like to buy a performing note. What does that look like to buy an asset that's performing? And I don't mean from the standpoint of like, okay, we're going to originate this note and hopefully they pay. I mean, this person's already been paying for 2 years, 3 years, 9 years. And so their propensity to pay, their likelihood that they're going to continue to pay increases, because you can look at a lot of this historical data and say, okay, they've got equity and all this other stuff. And before the night's over, I'll show you a strategy that will probably blow your mind as far as return on investment. I have yet to find pretty much anything else that will beat out this strategy and also carry a lower risk profile. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Another niche we talk about at Noteschool a lot is burnout landlords, right? What does it look like to raise money from burnout landlords? And this is an Eddieism, as we'll call it. Eddie's from Mississippi, so he says things, I'd say, differently than a lot of us. And so he calls them burnt out landlords. And these are simply landlords over the last 10 years or so. There was some research done that says between 2010 and 2020, there's been an increase of 18 million new investors into the real estate investing space. Why is that? Well, when you look at it, it's really 4 letters, and it's HGTV, right? Everybody fell in love with HGTV for the last decade. They got Chip and Joanna Gaines down in Texas. You got Vanilla Ice flipping houses in Florida. You've got some people in Cal. Everybody's got their favorite person, right? The Property Brothers, whoever it is, Mike Holmes maybe. But you've got your person, and you watch it and you fell in love with it. And then all of a sudden, there's one evening, it's the same story over and over again. There's one evening where they say, well, I was sitting on the couch and I leaned over to my wife and I said, honey, we should try this. Right. And so you've got people who have really no real estate background at all, which is fine, jumping into the real estate game, right? Because they're so intrigued by, well, if they can do it, what could be so hard about it? Right. And we should flip houses. And this is basically the conversation. And out of the number of these people that I've talked to, the reason we call them burnout landlords is because they started flipping houses because of what they saw on HGTV, right? But because of I'll even give them the benefit of the doubt, right? I'm not trying to bash on anybody. I always say, let's even assume they got a little education from a course or a seminar or something. And let's even say they bought it from a wholesaler so we know there's some sort of discount in there, right? And if we have those things, but with that in place, they still, their lack of managing contractors, or I'd say timelines, budgets, that kind of thing, their $20,000 rehab became 25 or 35, right? They ended up going over. And what we saw is this large influx of people who flipped houses and then decided, I'm not going to be profitable or profitable enough. And so what they said is, I'll just be a landlord. They had this light bulb moment of, oh my gosh, I'll just put a tenant in here and everything will be flawless for the next 30 years. And it'll be the best decision of my life. And the reality is, if they can hold on to it for 30 years, it will be the best decision of life. For some of you who have been around, I think it was Brad who said he's been around for 30 years or so years. If you bought a rental that long ago, it's probably panned out. But for anybody who's ever owned rentals, one of the biggest headaches I had was realizing this: it's not about 30 years. It's about getting through the first 1 to 5 years of owning a rental property where your rent rate hasn't gone up enough. Your property hasn't appreciated enough to pull out all your capital. All those repairs that you made when you were flipping it, that you were just going to fix it and sell the thing. Well, it finally broke 2 or 3 years later, and now it's your problem. You've got to go fix the furnace. You've got to go replace the whatever it is, right? And so what we see is this big trend of people putting more capital into a property that has the same cash flow. And what does that do? That drives down your rate of return. And so the reason we have this burnout landlord capital niche in here is because what we found is twofold. One, this is the greatest source of people to raise capital from right now, because what we're going to say is kind of this: you can basically go to any of these people and say, and there's probably a burnout landlord on this. And as we talk about this, you're going to identify with a lot of these things, right? You like the fact that you get cash flow when the tenant pays. You like the fact that it's attached to real estate. You like certain elements of this rental property. But there's also pieces that you kind of just deal with or maybe dislike, like the tenant's not paying, or the toilet breaking, or the fact that there's turnover and you've got to go in and spend more money to get this thing turned over and get a new tenant, right? There's these negative pieces that you say, I just deal with the negative in order to keep the positive. And this is where we can kind of step in and say, look, I understand completely, but what if I could show you a way to keep all of the good, but I take away all of the bad? Would you be interested in a dialogue of what that could look like? Right. And what you'll find is that sentence right there at least opens the door, but the conversation can go a lot of places from there. The easiest conversation right now is to say, hey, look, you don't want to be a landlord anymore, especially because of the eviction moratorium and all that. Hey, you can sell me all your properties with seller financing and you can be the bank. So instead of being the landlord and dealing with a tenant who isn't paying, you can now be the bank and provide the mortgage for me, who's going to be your new owner, basically. right? And I'm going to have a lot more propensity to pay than they are, right? And instead of me taking on all the tenants and the toilets and the turnover, I'll solve the tenant problem, and then I can turn around and I can resell this with seller financing to another buyer. And that works if there's a free and clear house. It works if they already have a mortgage, and we're going to talk about that as well. But this is kind of the gist of really what this looks like and why this conversation has really picked up over the last year, is because once that data started coming out, we started to realize, wow, I'm not the only accidental landlord, right? The first rental property I bought, I did on purpose, but the next two were like, wow, these were really bad flips, and I'm probably going to need to hang on to them for a little bit. But I don't own any rental properties anymore, and it's for a reason, because I've realized I could get much more stable cash flow doing it a little bit different way, and my return on investment actually, it happens, right? And so this is one category. And then probably the biggest category for us to talk about in the niches in the note business is the buying defaulted loans. What does it look like to buy bad debt? Why would you buy a mortgage of somebody who isn't paying their mortgage? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? But you got to think of it in terms of, if you can buy an ugly, distressed house, add value to it by rehabbing it, and then sell it at a profit, you can do the same thing with the paper side. I can buy an ugly, distressed, non-paying mortgage. I could show you how to rehab it, and we could show you how to make some really big money. The reason defaulted mortgages is probably the biggest conversation of the year is because COVID created millions and millions and millions of people who are not paying their mortgage, right? Well, not all of those people are going to get right back on track. There's going to be a huge wave of defaulted loans that are on their way, and including I can't remember who it was who was talking about commercial, but commercial was hit super hard as well, right? So this is another conversation. But if you're somebody who is interested in a little bit more active work, not active like fixing and flipping a house, as you'll find out, but I always like to say it's a little bit more active strategy. You're going to have to make some phone calls and send some emails. This kind of thing, Eddie will tell you, you can double your net worth in 2 to 5 years just on this one strategy. And he's already done it several times. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we do that, let's kind of start at the beginning of the timeline, and I'll walk you through kind of the whole, I'd say, whole story, right? You'll see the whole picture, and this will help you make it a little bit clear for as far as where does this fit in my business? Is this something I need to entertain? And how do I get started with this kind of stuff? So just simply imagine this for a second and go on this little metaphorical journey, and just imagine that you own a car dealership, right? Brand new cars, brand new car lot. You're trying to sell cars as fast as you can, but you don't have the ability to provide any sort of financing. So here's the question. Do you sell more cars or less cars if you can only accept cash, right? And we all know you're probably going to sell less cars, right? Because most cars, especially new cars, are sold on a payment, right? There's a financing variable. And that's the key. That's my whole point with this, is that there is this powerful variable known as financing. The auto industry figured out, hey, if we plug in this element and provide the financing, we can sell a lot more cars. And if we remove that powerful variable of financing, we're not going to sell as many, right? And that's really what this is all about. Same thing as a home builder. Building homes as fast as you can, but you can only sell them for cash. You're totally not going to sell as many houses. A great example that you can relate to is a furniture company, right? A furniture company, what would a furniture company be if it didn't offer you zero money down and no payments until your great grandkid graduates from college, right? It's always something absurd like this in their marketing. And my point is this: a furniture company can take $1,000 sofa and sell it to you for $2,000, double the price, all because they provide financing, right? That is the key. The furniture industry, the whole Warren Buffett figured this out many years ago when he bought Nebraska Furniture Mart, is he realized the financing arm is more powerful than anything else. So if you add this powerful variable to this industry, it can radically change your business. And as you're starting to see, this is kind of where I'm going with this. What would it look like if you could add this creative financing, this powerful financing variable to your business model? This essentially allows you to start to get a lot more access to financing. And one of the biggest benefits is you're going to get financing with terms that a bank would never give you, right? We basically grew up in a society to where whatever the bank tells you the terms are, we just agree to them. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'll point out some things, that some decisions you've made that you made them without even thinking about it. It's just how you think things work, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But we're going to talk about this powerful variable. And we really want to kind of dig into a few different things, but I really want to talk first about really the biggest elephant in the room, I would say. Or like I said earlier, the need in the market, the biggest need in the market. And that's simply, I need a method to be able to buy at full retail price, but still make a fortune. And I'm really kind of going to talk about this from the standpoint of, yes, you could pay full retail, but more importantly, I could show you how to make more money paying retail than you could make buying it at a discount, which is kind of counterintuitive. But this was what really shifted my business in 2018, 2019, was just this realization of prices started to go up. The seller sentiment in the market was sellers were starting to think, oh, my house must be worth more. And so we started simply saying, I can give you whatever price you want, right? We're also going to talk about what does it look like to basically get rid of your competition, or I'd say limit your competition. And a good example of this is making offers on properties that really no one else is making offers on. And there's lots of examples. Actually, I'll just tie it into the first one, which is if you are doing marketing, right? If you talk to a seller and they receive one of your letters maybe, and they call you and you answer, you're trying to figure out what do you want to sell it for, right? How did you come to that price? What are you going to do with this money? All that kind of stuff. And when they tell you a number that you know is retail, are you going to spend a lot of your time going out to that house, running an appointment, spending 2 hours with them, running the numbers? Are you going to do all that? No. Most people say, hey, that's retail. I need to be able to list this thing, or I need to outsource it to a broker or an agent. I need to monetize the lead in some form or fashion. But you know, right out of the gate, you're not talking this person down 20, 30%, right? And so if a lot of investors are not going on those appointments, that immediately limits a lot of your competition, and you're going to start to see that. But more importantly, the thing that I really like to talk about is the thing that I missed, because it's the most important part of my business model now. And that really is, how do I earn big money today, but also get bonus cash flow for the future, right? See, again, in 2016, when Eddie was talking about this, all I heard was money tomorrow, retirement, builds your wealth. And I'm thinking, I'll starve to death before I reach wealth. Like I need food money. My kids eat 17 snacks a day, it seems like. So I need money now. I can't just wait to be able to build my wealth. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit if that's something you're interested in, right? And this works even if you don't have a real estate investing business started up. So if you're brand new, you're someone who's like, hey, I haven't even done my first deal yet, you're going to see how this can play into exactly your business model right away. And that really is going to matter to some of you. And so quickly, just everybody understands this transaction. I'm hoping you got a buyer, a seller, a house, and a bank. Typical traditional transaction. Seller is going to deed the ownership over to the buyer. The buyer is going to end up owning the asset, but they have to fund it. Traditionally, they're going to go get a mortgage note from a bank, and the bank will fund the entire transaction and put a lien on the property, right? We got that part. Really, what I want to talk about tonight, though, is really our role, the investor role. How does this work, right? Well, like I talked about a minute ago, when you're trying to contact sellers or the sellers contact you, we really are trying to get after the one main thing we need to know, which is, what does the seller want? We need a number, right? Because that number tells us really the interest level, how serious of a lead this is, how fast I need to act. It tells us a lot of things. We also want to know their motives, right? Why are they selling? Why do they need that price? What are they going to do with this money? All that kind of stuff. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but it sure sounds like it from the haves and wants, but it seems like that your area is very similar to mine in that sellers want an insanely high price. I would say an unrealistic price a lot of times. And it's, what do I do with that, right? How do I start to monetize these leads, especially if you're somebody, I should have asked this at the beginning, but we'll go ahead and skip over it. I don't know how many of you are spending marketing dollars right now, but now today's marketplace compared to 5 years ago, you have to spend a substantial amount more on marketing in order to generate the same number of leads, right? If you want to go down that path. And so if sellers want this high price, how do we start to monetize that, right? So let's come back to our investor scenario. Again, a seller is going to deed the property over once we have a deal made. And again, for those of you who can qualify for a mortgage, great. I'm not saying this mortgage thing doesn't work out. I'm not saying you can't go get a mortgage at a bank. Here's what I am saying, though, and I'd like you to just at least entertain for a second, which is this: how many bank loans can you actually get? Right? How many loans will a bank give you before you mortgage out, right? A lot of banks will say, we'll give you 4 or 10 on your social security number, and then we got to go to your spouse's. And then eventually what you do is you have to figure out this weird gap in your business and it took me so long to figure out, how do I jump from this residential side to over this commercial side, to where it's like this commercial lender will give me one loan, but it's for all 17 houses or whatever it is, right? So you kind of got to make that jump. And that's not even including the conversation of how many of you can't qualify for a mortgage, right? When I lost my job, the banks looked at me like I was a toxic asset basically for 2.5 years because they wanted to have 2 years of tax returns filed. They didn't care what the cash flow was my first year or second year. They literally only wanted to make sure I have 2 full years, and then they would average it, and then they would treat me like a human being. This was my experience, right? So some of us are in a spot to where we're called penalty box buyers, meaning that like we're really qualified to buy a mortgage, but we're put in this penalty box because of one thing or another. Sometimes it's your credit score is not perfect. Sometimes you don't have enough down payment. Sometimes your tax returns aren't, where they're supposed to be in order to fulfill all these little rules they have. And so again, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but just entertain this for a second. What if we got rid of the bank completely and the seller plays the role of the bank? See, the seller is willing to play the role of the bank for the same 2 reasons that anybody on the planet would be willing to play the role of the bank, because the bank only cares about 2 things. And that is, what do you get, right? You're going to get something, right? It's for the seller. In this case, a lot of times it's the price. Maybe it's a payment. Maybe it's an interest rate. Maybe there's something in there that they're willing to say, I would rather take payments than sell the house outright, right? We'll talk a little bit about that. But they get something, and that's what we care about, right? If you're going to sell something, what do you get? That's important. The second piece, obviously, is the like what happens when things go wrong, right? How am I protected if you get hit by a bus? If I'm your bank, how do I make sure my money stays safe, right? In this case, we're talking about collateral that secures everything that they're very familiar with, right? We're saying this is a house that you own, that you've lived in all these years, or you've rented out all this year. You have a general idea of what it's worth. You got a general idea of how much repairs that have been done or might be needed or whatever. So it's not a big mental leap. You're not asking them to say, hey, take my family's farm tractor as collateral and this baseball card collection, maybe, right? This is collateral that they're like, yeah, I understand if you get hit by a bus, I'll be fine, right? And what a lot of people don't understand, it's like the banks have this figured out. When things go wrong in a transaction, the bank always seems to be taken care of. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And so this is what it looks like to play the role of the bank. And we're going to talk about what does this mean for you as the investor, right? So when I sat down with Eddie, and this is back in 2018 now, and I'm trying to I'm getting a little bit desperate because I'm trying to figure out how all this works. I need some leads coming in. I had a team of about 6 people working for me at the time. And so I needed leads and I needed conversions. And we're trying to wholesale houses here. And so I sat down. One of the first things Eddie started me off with is this concept, and it's offers versus accepted ratio. And he said, how many offers are you making before you get a deal done? And I said, look, Eddie, I make on average 20 offers right now to get 1 cash offer accepted. He goes, great. And for you, it might be 17 or 13 or 25 or 50. It doesn't matter what the number is. The math will always, the story is the same, and it's going to apply to you just like it did to me. And so he said, all right, great. You're getting 1 deal out of 20. So Brian, if you need to do, I don't know, let's just call it 2 deals in a month. How do you do 2 deals in a month? And I say, Eddie, I spend more marketing dollars. I get more leads. I make another 20 offers. And I know statistically it's going to work out to where I'm going to get another deal out of those 20. So I had 40 offers made. I made two deals, right? This is pretty common sense. And he said, great. I'm not telling you not to do that, right? Here's what I want you to think about, Brian. Are you taking a bigger risk by increasing your marketing budget? I said, yeah, I'm doubling my marketing budget typically to do that. He goes, okay, you're doubling your marketing budget. All right, so that's a higher risk. But why aren't you talking about the other 19? I was like, what are you talking about? These 19, these are just people who didn't, these people did not accept my cash offer, right? I'm following up with them is typically what I told him. And this is where he kind of got me thinking, as he said, all right, they're in your follow-up file. I get that. But really, if they haven't sold to you, these are no's, right? And it took me, I'll be honest, it took me a while to really embrace this concept, but I'm telling you, this is a fact. Follow-up is so important, but follow-up is a hope game, right? I really thought I had this follow-up system and that it was working because I was taking these steps, but really I'm just hoping they lowered their price. I hope that they come to their senses. I hope they like me more than they like the other wholesaler. I hope they call me back, right? That's really all that was. I didn't really have any secret sauce to be able to get them to change their mind, because all I was doing is reminding them, hey, I'm still here and my price is still the exact same, right? And Eddie really kind of shook me up on this because he said, these 19, you really don't have any value to offer them. What if I could show you a way to just simply say, you have 1 that you're going to get on the 20 offers? That works. That works. But instead of doubling down, spending twice as much money on leads, why not spend no extra money and change your strategy a little bit on these other 19? I said, what are you talking about? He said, I want to show you basically how these 19 that are in your follow-up file, these are really in your trash can. These are dead leads, right? How many of your follow-up file, your follow-up leads are you really closing? And I can't remember what the number was, but I told him that we had that metric and I could go pull it. And the bottom line is a fairly low number, right? So I was getting some, but again, it was all based on hope. And he said, why don't we do this, Brian? Why don't I just show you that there's a way to convert some of these to yeses by simply calling the seller back and say, hey, I think I found a way to give you the price that you want. When's the time we can sit down and talk about this, right? Well, for one, it definitely gets me back in the door, right? I'm not saying every single one of them is going to say yes, but what Eddie's found over the years is as he's run this model over and over again, that it always averages out to be about 2 point something. So people are closing a second deal, sometimes a third deal on the same number of offers that they're making, right? So if you're making 20 offers, you get your one deal done without spending any more money whatsoever and not even running more appointments because you've already talked to this seller. You've already run this appointment. You're getting a second deal. Some people are getting a third deal done. This is a really important thing to consider at this point in the market cycle for the sole reason of sellers win a lot. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, because when I buy it on terms, meaning the seller is going to provide the financing, I can give them any price that they want, basically, right? Because it's not about the price that I pay. It's about when I pay that price, meaning that I'm going to pay it over time. We're going to talk about that. Especially on Saturday, I'll show you several case studies about how we implement this. But really what I want to show you is this, because I've been to so many different events over the years as I've tried to grow my business. And, obviously I've got the benefit of going to a lot of Eddie's events over the years. But one of the things that I've noticed is there's this trend of like, hey, remember how I was telling you at the beginning, I have this shiny object syndrome. Like, I got a new strategy, quit what you're doing, come do my new thing, right? That's not what I'm here to do. Right? That's really not a great business strategy to just constantly be changing to the next thing. See, this is a typical growth of a real estate investor, or evolution of a real estate investor, as some might say, right? The easiest barrier to entry, the lowest barrier to entry is going to be being a bird dog, right? You get a fee it's like referring a deal, basically, right? And if somebody buys it, you get a fee. But eventually, if you bird dog long enough, you figure out, wait a minute, I can gain some specialized knowledge, learn to take equitable interest in a contract, allowing me to basically take down the property myself and market for my own buyer, find my own buyer, that kind of stuff. And I can wholesale the property and I can make 10 times as much money. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Yeah, I can make $5,000 or $10,000 on a wholesale deal. And then as you'll see in my story over and over again, I say, why am I making 5 or 10 grand? I'm flipping this to somebody who goes out and makes 30, 40, 50 grand. Maybe I should flip houses, right? And so I scaled up my fix and flip business, even though that is not something I'm that talented at. Because eventually what you see even with the fix and flippers is they start to say, this is a lot of work. I think I want to find a way to be more passive, right? And they find themselves in this, I'm going to go more to the building wealth strategy. I'm going to be a landlord. And none of these are wrong. There's not a right or a wrong in any of these. All I'm trying to say is this is a rather common approach, right? I happen to start as a wholesaler instead of a bird dog. Some of you started in other areas. Some of you just started as landlords. But this is kind of where people stop. And this whole concept of being a deal architect, what's so beautiful about it is not, hey, do my new strategy. Listen to what Eddie says. He'll make your business look like my business, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. What Eddie's whole point is, look, by becoming a deal architect and gaining this different way of thinking, you'll become a better bird dog or a better wholesaler. Right. A great example in my business when I first learned this is I immediately implemented this from the strategy of I'm going to wholesale everything that this would apply to. Right. So here's like a house in my hometown of Flower Mound, Texas. It's worth about 190. The rehab needed was about 20 grand. The seller was asking for 161,000. Okay. So there's not really any equity and there's 9 grand total for literally everything and closings, anything else. Right. If I'm going to wholesale it, it's going to make it pretty tough. Right. And the cash flow wasn't killer, right? For me, maybe for like a newer investor or something like that, or someone who's just looking for a very strong return over the long haul, might be a winner. But the bottom line is there's no equity in here. And so I couldn't go and be like, hey, I'm going to wholesale this for 10 grand, right? Maybe even 5 grand. And as you see in the pictures, it's not that it's in horrible shape. It's in reasonably good shape, but it did need a little bit of work, right? But here's the thing. When I first called this lead, this happened to be a for sale by owner. When I first called them, This is a little embarrassing story, but when I first called him, I was like, hey, this is Brian and this is my company and we buy houses and I'll buy it with cash and I'll close in 7 days. And I go through the whole spiel, right? That conversation lasted about a minute and a half. He's like, no, thank you. And then I heard the dial tone, you know what I'm saying? And so I waited a couple of days. I waited like 3 or 4 days and then called back, kind of hoping maybe he just like forgot me, like maybe he forgot who I was when I called the last time. And I kind of just approached it from a different angle. And I just simply said, hey, saw the house sale. What are you trying to do? Right. What do you want for the house? This whole thing. I didn't tell him I was going to pay cash or anything. And he just came out with it and said, well, I've owned this house for almost 40 years. I own a bunch of them and I don't want to sell it and pay the capital gains on this money. I mean, like on all that cash that I would receive. So I'm going to sell it with seller financing. So here I am thinking like, oh my gosh, this is gold. This is exactly what Eddie's talking about, right? Savvy investors understand the benefits that come with seller financing. And he was looking at this from a standpoint of how do I pay way less taxes? Right. And so I said, great. So we start the conversation. I was able to look at the house, put together the numbers. Again, it's not going to work for me to go wholesale the property for cash, but if he provides the property and the financing, I could package all that up together and take it to my buyers list and said, who wants a rental property with financing attached? And you still have reasonable cash flow, right? And at that time, I had plenty of buyers to be able to do it. And I was able to generate a $7,000 fee, a wholesale fee, all on a deal that I was never going to be able to buy for cash at the deeper discount that I would need, right? The reason that this didn't get sold to another local landlord or another wholesaler in my area, I'm finding out like after the fact, is the simple realization of nobody was really listening to what the seller wanted. Everybody was so set on, I could pay this lower price and what he's saying sounds complicated and all this kind of stuff, right? And so the goal is, again, I didn't have to go out and stop what I was doing. It allows me to do more deals, all because I changed the lens in my real estate glasses, so to speak, and I see more opportunity in the marketplace. That's what being a deal architect is all about, right? If you want to flip houses, hey, is it beneficial to be able to get the seller to be able to provide financing for a 9-month period for you to flip the house and you just have to come up with the rehab? Is it beneficial if they'll do it at 1.5% interest or 3% interest? Probably. That's very beneficial for most people, right? Same thing with the landlord. The biggest conversation of the last year is for those of you who are buying rental properties in this marketplace, stop putting 20% down. There's a great opportunity. I don't care if you have $1 million in cash sitting there. If you're putting 20% down, you buy X number of houses. If I could show you how to get the seller to provide the financing, long-term financing for you, it will allow you to be able to take that capital stack and spread it out over more and more assets, right? This is kind of the concept behind being a deal architect. It's simply approaching the same deals you're already interested in, but bringing more tools in your tool bag to get the problems accomplished, right? And so the reason I kind of start with this is because I like to tie it back to why now this is so important, why this is the biggest need in the marketplace, is because when in 2016, Eddie's telling me I need to change my business model, and I'm sitting there scaling my marketing because it's working really well. Our buyers list was really growing as well. I didn't need any new results in my business. So why would I take some sort of new action? Well, by 2018, 2 years later in my market, things started shifting a lot and I had to change the actions if I wanted to stay in business. And I really had to change the actions if I wanted new results to thrive in my business, right? And I think basically since COVID started, this has been the big shakeup is people are realizing, man, I can't keep doing the same thing and get the results that I had. I need to adapt to the market circumstances. And right now, the biggest one, the loudest one is the fact that sellers want these high prices. So let's find a way to give it to them, right? The cool part about what I'm going to show you today, though, and we'll get more into it on Saturday, is the fact that this really boils down to the thing that I missed. It's all about figuring out what are your needs. Do you need to make money today? Do you need to make money tomorrow? Some of you are like me, you're both, right? I need money today because I've got overhead. I have employees. I've got a family to feed. I've got kids. I've got a house, right? I need money today. But I also want money tomorrow. I also want to, with every deal that I do, I want to be able to get some sort of bonus thing in the future without any additional work, right? I want bonus money for no extra effort, right? And some people are saying, look, I'm just money today. I'm really focusing on making money right now. I need money very quickly. That's fine. Money today. Some of you are saying, I don't want any more taxable income. I really just want to focus on building my wealth, like Eddie talked to you in 2016. None of these are wrong. But what I'm saying is, if you know this part, if you know if you're money today, money tomorrow, or maybe you're both, if you can figure that part out, you can do any of these strategies and they all accomplish that goal, right? This is what's beautiful is this isn't like when I was flipping houses, it's all about money today. It's all about, I'm trying to generate taxable income, right? Income that I can spend. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that was my goal for the time, right? And goals change. So if you can figure this out, you'll start to see how this can start to apply in your business. And I'll quickly show you an example, and I'll get into more of these details on Saturday. We just don't have the time today, but Seth and Brianna Cho, they are out in California, and he's a good guy, your traditional investor, right? It wasn't that long ago, he was just buying a handful of houses every year, trying to make it by, trying to make it happen, really trying to grow his business. And he's just like anybody else, right? He's trying to buy houses. But the reality is, over the years, very similar story to mine, is he started running into these problems. The sellers want a ton of money. How do I compete with that? And on top of that, now there's more investors in the space. And so how does he go about solving these problems? Well, he tried the two things that are probably most common, but you definitely see him a lot. He had joined some Facebook groups and some masterminds, and he was just trying to copy what other people were doing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But one of the things is he was competing on the low margin model, right? This is what I've always referred to as the Walmart model. And this simply means that he was going to outbid every other wholesaler by $500 or $1,000, and he would make less money, but he would be doing more deals. Like he would try to make it up in volume. Well, the problem with that is you typically can't do enough volume to really make it worth it. But on top of that, you're taking a massive risk and you're working literally more hours and you're making less money per deal. So it's not exactly psychologically, it's not a great mental, game to play. But some people somehow find a way to make it work, right? And you just got to be willing to put in the hours. He was not. And so he decided this is too much. There's a better way. And he was at a mastermind and went back to what we see a lot of the higher volume guys do, which is double down on your marketing, right? Spend more money. You're spending 10 grand, spend 20 grand. You need to bet on yourself, right? And some people, they can make that work. Right. In Seth's case, he started running out of money too quickly. And he was like, I'm not converting enough of these. And so I can't keep doubling down. It's way too high of a risk. I'm really shelling out tons of money. And it was in that same mastermind that he actually talked to another guy who happened to be a Noteschool student and said, you know what you need to do is you need to actually go talk to Eddie Speed and kind of learn his approach on how he views this thing from kind of a deal architect type of a strategy, and it'll allow you to probably solve a lot of your problems with the sellers as well as your competition and all this other kind of stuff, right? The cool thing about Seth too is he's kind of a rock star in that it wasn't that long ago he was just buying a handful of houses. Now he buys over 100 houses a year. The guy's what we call a ninja, right? If you buy over 100 houses a year, we call you a real estate ninja. And the crazy part is a lot of you, it's not about 100 houses a year, right? That's not what this is about. What I'm trying to say though is if you buy 5 houses a year or 20 houses a year, would it be beneficial to get another 5 or another 20 to get twice as many deals without spending any more money on leads you already have? Remember, you've already run these appointments. You've already talked to these sellers. You've already made them an offer. You already have all the information you need to be able to go and execute on a different strategy. All you need is that specialized knowledge to go out and make it happen, right? And so when you look at this deal, it's a nice house. The seller was in their 70s. They were moving out of state from California to Arizona. They don't want to rent it anymore. It's a somewhat unique property, but it's in great shape, right? You're not going to see Chip and Joanna Gaines walk out the front door, but like the tenant had left it in really great shape. They cleaned it up already. You could list it. But in this case, the reason that they didn't is because the seller was stuck on price. Could you imagine? Can anybody relate to this where the seller might be stuck on price? So Seth's all prepared to pay this $375,000 price, right? You have a ballpark. When you're going into an asset or a house, you know probably where you need to be. You've run your comps. You got a general rule of thumb of like, well, if the rehab is this, it'll probably be this much. If it's this, it'll probably be this much. You kind of have a ballpark where you're going to be. And when you get there, you can always change those numbers up, right? But the seller wanted $450,000. And he was stuck on it, right? He really was. He was stuck on this price. And so Seth knew right out of the gate, we have to approach this differently. And Seth went into what Eddie calls the talk off. And we'll talk about more of it on Saturday. But the talk off is simply this logical, rational conversation of really, how do I convince the seller that selling with seller financing to me is one of their best options, right? How can I show them options in a logical, rational way to show them, look, the math is in your favor. I would consider this, right? That's what the talk off is. It's not this slick salesy thing that I see so many people try this, almost like this slick salesy type of an approach to somehow confuse the seller. I don't know if they're trying to confuse the seller or like sneak around them. I can't figure out what that approach is all about. But if you use logic and reasons, it's amazing how much farther you can get. And so he says, all right, Mr. Seller, I think I have a way to get you $450,000. But before we talk about $450,000, right, what we really need to discuss is what your immediate cash needs are. Like, what do you need in the next 60 to 90 days? Okay, where he's going with this is he's going to start a conversation of pretty much what the down payment is, as well as we're going to justify the $450,000. So the seller in this case is saying, I need $450,000. Well, Seth's about to prove to him he doesn't need it. He wants it, but he doesn't need it. And Seth says, what are your immediate cash needs? Like, what kind of money do you need over the next 60 to 90 days? And the seller kind of creates this list. You go through this process of really understanding what the seller's needs are, and they could be anything. And it doesn't matter what they are. It could be anything in the world. This is what the seller needs. It could be for college tuition or medical bills or debt or moving expenses. It could be anything, right? The bottom line is we just need the number. And in this case, the seller needed 50 grand, which is a huge down payment, right? But keep this in mind. What we're doing in this point is we're explaining to the seller, okay, so you need $50,000. You don't need $450,000, right? If I can give you $50,000 today, this solves your immediate problem. We just got to worry about how do we get the other 400, right? And in this case, this is a free and clear house with a huge down payment. So this is like one side of the spectrum. And you'll see that this conversation, especially on Saturday, is a spectrum, right? It's you've got free and clear houses, they have no mortgage, and some of them want these huge down payments. If I could show you how to make that work, you'll start recognizing deals. I'll go to the whole other side where they have no equity in the property. They are mortgaged to the hilt or they're upside down and they want no down payment, right? They don't need a down payment. I'll show you both sides of the spectrum and kind of everything in between. You'll start to see and recognize, oh my gosh, I know a seller like this. And so what Seth had to do was say, all right, you need $50,000. If I can give you the 50 now, we could talk about the 400, but you'd have to seller finance. Let's talk about what that looks like. And in this case, the seller was okay with seller financing. Again, as long as he's going to get 50 grand today, that's going to be okay, right? The only other variable as you go through this is you want to ask the seller, hey, what are some of the other things that you need, right? What's most important to you? And Seth would have already walked through all the options, right? A lot of people don't do this. So even if you aren't interested in this, something from an acquisition model from a guy who's talked to a couple thousand sellers, you should really entertain if you're trying to buy houses is point out all the things you're afraid to ask the seller. Those are probably the things you should definitely be asking. So for example, when we're talking to sellers, you want to ask, hey, why don't you list the house? You want retail price, just list it. They're going to tell you all the reasons why that's not going to work and why your strategy is going to work. In this case, when Seth asked that, he says, there's no way I'm listing it at 450. I'd have to pay real estate commissions. And Seth says, okay, so it's really about coming off of that 450. You are really stuck on this price. Then the seller decided to overshare and say, yeah, but what if it sells for 440 and then I got to pay real estate commission? So he's proving his own point, right? And so that's fine, Mr. Seller. Let's try to find a way to get you what you need, right? If you want 450, all right, I can get you need $50,000 down. What else? Like, give me all the information and let's put together a plan. The only other thing was the seller was in their 70s. So a 30-year mortgage isn't going to be a great fit, right? So basically what they said is, look, in 10 years, I want to be paid off, right? So Seth has 10 years to be able to refinance this house, sell it, or pay it off, right? And we're going to talk about why that's not a problem at all and why this isn't a concern for Seth. But the bottom line is it's going to take a deal architect to get this deal done because a wholesale deal isn't an option here, right? This is what I was talking about a minute ago when I said it's not about the price that you pay. It's not about the 450. It's about when you pay that price. So what that looks like is it's $50,000 today, but the other 400,000, that's going to be tomorrow. And we have to have a whole nother conversation about what tomorrow looks like. But if it's over time, there's a lot more options, right? And so when we look at this, Seth kind of continues the dialogue and basically explains, look, I want to make a monthly payment to you and, can $1,000 a month work for you, right? Now, a lot of this is just simply, you got to remember what the conversation you just had was, what's important to the seller. He didn't say anything about, I need $863 a month to be able to pay my bills or, live my lifestyle. He literally just said, I want my 450, I want my $50,000 down. And yeah, I'm in my 70s. I don't want to wait more than really 10 years to make this thing happen. Okay, fine. So Seth throws out $1,000 for the sole reason of Seth already knows on a 30-year mortgage, At 0% interest, the payment's $11.11 a month. Now, not everybody's going to say yes to 0%. I'm not saying this is going to happen every time, but if it's said correctly, and if you approach it from the standpoint of, I'm actually going to help this guy get the pieces that he wants, you can give it to him and they'll say yes to it. And the crazy part is, on Saturday, I'll go more into it, but like, what if this is where they freak out? Because there's somebody at the beginning here who always freaks out and says, well, what if they say they want 5%? There's no way, because I would never take 0%. Okay, you simply, again, point out to the fact what's most important to you. What do you want then? You want 7%? I'll give you 7%. But if I give you 7% interest, I can't give you all $50,000 down. I can't give you all $450,000. Something, it's a math problem. I have to make the math work, and I have to be able to give you what you want, but also be able to find a way to make money, right? It becomes very logical, very understanding. And what you're going to find out is that at this point, especially with interest, if they say something about interest, you're going to find out how attached to that purchase price, that sales price, you're going to find out how attached to it they are, right? And so what this looks like is a 0% mortgage, and in 10 years, right, it's amortized over 30 years, but in 10 years, after 10 years of payments, you got to have this whole thing refinanced, paid off, or something like that. Seth is going to package all this up now that he's acquired it, right? And on Saturday, I get to go through a lot more of the steps. We talk about the psychology. And if you're lost on the $50,000 down or the 0% interest, it makes so much more sense on Saturday because I just have time to unpack it all. But the bottom line is this: even if you don't have $50,000 to do this deal, you're like, I could never do this deal. I don't have 50 grand down, right? Seth had $50,000 at the time. So he went ahead and put it up because he knew he was only going to have to put it up for 30 to 45 days. But what if you didn't have $50,000? I'm going to show you on Saturday how you could still do this deal, how the seller still gets their $50,000 and everything. You could do this deal with none of your own money, right? This can be a no money down deal. And you'll see why that $50,000 can be raised from a private investor. And if you've never raised money in your life, it will spoil you, because raising that $50,000 will be easier than raising anything else in your life, because you're raising $50,000 that's protected by a $450,000 house. You see what I'm saying? That investor is so well protected that their risk is just insanely low. They almost hope you get hit by a bus, right? That kind of thing. So what he's going to do is he's going to package it up. He's going to resell it. And when he resells it to a very specific person called the penalty box buyer that I talked about earlier. We'll talk more about it, but this is somebody who typically pays a premium price. They pay a premium interest rate. Actually, 90% of the time, the interest rate falls between 6 and 10%. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, I would never pay that, you're probably right. You probably wouldn't. But guess what? There is a $1 trillion marketplace of buyers. Well, we don't really know the number. It could be multi-trillion now. In 2019, it was a $1 trillion marketplace. When COVID happened, it exploded. And there's more penalty box buyers today than ever before. But what you're going to do is you're going to resell this, right? You're going to get a higher interest rate, which yields a higher payment. And obviously, any buyer that you're selling it to would assume all of the same stuff that Seth is assuming. So it's a 30-year amortization. And this penalty box buyer has 10 years to refinance it, pay it off, or, hey, sell it, right? And the cool part is we're going to help him do it, right? Very, very simple. The bottom line is Seth is buying it on terms. He's turning around, he's reselling it on terms, and it looks like this. You're reselling it at a premium price, right? Because it's not subject to any sort of appraisal or anything like this. It just needs to appraise for that in 10 years. This is why we say premium price. Every now and then someone will say, well, it'll be worth 600 grand in 10 years. I understand, but you can't. There's some predatory lending stuff that you can get into if you start saying, I'm going to sell it for 600 grand. First of all, no one's going to talk to you if you offer it at 600 grand. Like, you're not going to find a buyer. But secondly, you just need to stay away from it. You can charge a premium because you're providing a service. You're providing a house with the financing attached to it, right? $75,000 down. I'll show you on Saturday why COVID was the trigger for really big down payments. This is something that no one seems to understand, that everybody thinks, oh, we're in this hard time. People don't have money. People have way more money than you would ever imagine. And the number of down payment, or the amount of the down payments, has been going up and up and up since COVID started. And the people with down payments is huge. And the amount of money they have is huge. And so he's going to target somebody who has a $75,000 payment. Why? Well, because Seth wants some money today. Seth put up 50 grand of his own money, right? 45 days later, he wants to be able to get that back. And he also wants $25,000 today. And so when he bought it, you see it was at 0%, an 11.11 payment. When he sold it, it was at a higher price with a bigger down payment, a higher interest, a higher payment, which allows the cash flow to happen. And so on this deal, Seth got $1,550 a month for up to 10 years, right? Now, this is great. He's made a little bit of money now. He's also getting some cash flow, but this is the piece that most people don't understand. In 10 years, let's say this guy waits all the way to the last second. The penalty box buyer waits to the last second to refinance it, pay it off, or sell it. On the last day, he says, I need a payoff. Well, because his mortgage paid down slower, he owes $343,000. Seth, on the other hand, hey, he owes less because he had 0% interest. So Seth only owes $266, which means that Seth gets a bonus check of $76,000 somewhere in the future, 10 years from now, that's just sitting out there. He's not going to do anything. He's literally just waiting for this check to come in. He didn't have to do anything else. Whenever the buyer decides to refinance, he'll get this bonus check, right? And so when we look at this deal, he's making 25 grand down plus a year of cash flow. He's making 43,000 his first year on this one deal. Then he's going to make this monster cash flow every single year until that refinances, pays off, or sells, and then he'll get this bonus check, right? Whatever the payoffs end up being, which means he's going to make up to $287,000, all in a deal that he had to pay retail for, and all in a deal that there was no wholesale deal here, right? As a wholesaler, you can't go in and be like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, right? And for my people who are like, well, I monetize these leads by outsourcing them to an agent, I'm going to go on a limb and say you're not making more than like 5 grand, right? Or 10 grand. And if you are making 10 grand, that's awesome. Those are great agents, apparently. So the point is that there's really a ton of this. And my only point with this, talking about today specifically, because again, on Saturday, we'll get into more details, is really just to point out this concept of, hey, have you missed some deals? Have you talked to sellers who want a retail price? Do you have an opportunity to call them back now and say, I think I found a way to be able to give you this price that you want? You simply need to learn this talk off, right? What does it look like to be able to have this logical, rational conversation of showing the seller, hey, this is going to be in your best interest if you look at it this way. And again, if one of them says yes, great. You just made a good chunk of change. You monetized the lead that you weren't going to. Not all of them are going to, but you only need one to really make it worth it, right? And so, like I said, this is, again, I know this is super, super fast, y'all. And I'm trying to, and I've kind of budgeted a little bit of time for some questions at the end here, but I wanted to just simply position this as kind of a beginning of a conversation of what a property looks like to pay retail that's free and clear, that has a huge down payment, and show you if it's possible with this, what else can it be possible with? And on Saturday, I'll show you this one, which this was a deal that has no equity in it. It was bought 10 months ago on a 0 down VA loan. So they put no money down and they've only made 10 payments. How much equity could there possibly be? And I'm going to show you how this deal was done. You make $20,000 down. It's no money down to do this deal. You make 20 grand. Plus, you're going to go and continue to get that cash flow for no extra effort, no extra work, for 30 years. It's literally just going to be this long-term cash flow coming in, ultimately making over 200 grand. Again, all on a deal that's probably in your trash can, all in a deal you haven't monetized yet, or there just isn't some wholesale deal there, right? And for those of you who are like, I don't have a trash can full of leads, Brian, like I'm not 100% sure where you're going if I'm brand new. Well, let me kind of show you this. I needed to show you this first before I introduce you to Big Papi. Now, I know he plays baseball on the other side of the country from you guys, but for any baseball fans, this is arguably one of the best designated hitters in baseball. And all you got to know about Big Papi, or really all you got to know about a designated hitter, is they have one job. Their only job is to hit home runs, right? To bring runs in. They don't typically play a second base or a pitcher or anything else. This is really all they do is hit the ball. And what's fascinating is Eddie has trained 300 of the top 500 real estate investors in the country. These are the people buying 100, 150, 200 houses every single year for the past several years, higher volume investors. And as he's out doing these trainings with them, he's finding this massive resistance from the higher volume shops. He's realizing, wait a minute, I'm saying you need to add creative financing to your acquisition model. It will radically change your business, just like he told me, right? And what he's seeing is like these people have teams of people and they're fighting it because what's happening is they're saying, look, you're making me shift an entire team of people. Like I've got them in a routine. It's a machine that's running. Don't put anything else in the machine. The machine's fine. The machine's running. And he's consistently shocked at how high a percentage the number of people are getting pushback. Now, eventually they come around, but it might take what, a year, 2 years? Some of them, they just won't. And that's fine. They have their machine. It's a different way of doing things. But because of this, Eddie, being the innovator that he is, he saw this massive niche and this opportunity. He said, I could take somebody who's brand new, right? Doesn't know anything about real estate. They've never even done their first real estate deal. And I could teach them a little bit about creative financing, and I could turn them into a real estate designated hitter. Now, here's what this looks like. This means that we can basically equip you with a little bit of knowledge and literally a script and a criteria and say, hey, listen, go call on these larger investment shops, right? They're the easiest to find because they do all the SEO. They're all over Google and Facebook and everything else. So they're the easiest to find, and simply call them up. And the pitch is essentially, hey, I'm a real estate investor. We close unclosable deals. Basically, we do things a little bit differently, right? And I've heard people say it so many different ways, but essentially that's it. You're closing deals, they aren't closing, but you got to say it in a way that's not like you're not aggressively attacking them, right? You're just trying to provide value. And you're going to say this, look, I have criteria that I would like to send you of the houses that we buy. And here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to review that list. And if you have any assets that match that criteria, this is the next step. I want you to work that lead as long as you possibly can. Work it until you've decided they aren't going to sell to you. And once you've decided this is a dead lead, I want you to give me 30 days to close the deal. And if I can close the deal, I want to share in the profit in some form or fashion. This allows you to make money without costing you anything. And I've created some revenue for myself. This is what we specialize in. And hey, it's a great opportunity. You probably have a lot of criteria, and I just need a shot at one to show you that it works. And then if that works, we can talk about doing more. So let me be super clear. This is another real estate investor who's built a business. They started the real estate company. They come up with the money to do the marketing. They've done the marketing. They've talked to the seller. They run the appointment. They know what the seller wants, what the seller doesn't want, what's wrong with the house. They've gathered all this intel. They followed up, and they've said, there's no way this person's going to sell. Okay, if they will give you 30 days to close this deal, you can call the seller up and say, let's figure out what you want. Let's give you those pieces of it. And let's see if we can find a way to give you the rest over time, right? Again, not every single one's going to do it. But again, these are free leads. So many people jumping into the real estate space who have, no experience, or I would say they have not done their first deal yet. They're trying to find ways of how can I get started without spending a couple grand a month on marketing? This is a free way to get involved. And what's even crazier is so many people have so many leads right now in today's marketplace because everybody wants retail. So these trash cans are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And imagine being a shop that buys 100 plus houses a year. How many leads do you think they have? It's an insane amount, right, in their trash can. And so it simply allows you to be able to provide some value to some other investors in your space, and you'll quickly become known as basically that person, right? This is another way to do it. And the cool part about this is totally within reach for literally everybody, right? It's one of those, like, you don't need any money to invest. You don't need any credit. You don't spend the marketing. You literally just need to be shown how to go out and structure these winning offers that work for everybody and create a profitable note moving forward. So the concept here is just simply like, if you're brand new, plug it in, right? This is a great way for you to get started. It allows you to gain some specialized knowledge. And again, continue on that path. Once you get these deals, you can wholesale them, you can rent them, you can do a hodgepodge of different things. A lot of people are going to turn around and resell them, right? But it just allows you to get going. And that's kind of nice. If you're somebody who's already marketing, you're already a successful wholesaler or something like that, you can go call your competition and buy all their dead leads, right? And by buy their dead leads, I mean work their dead leads, right? If it matches the criteria, tell them to send it over. In kind of the essence of time here, I want to kind of go through, I've been talking for about an hour, so let me kind of walk through this. There's two more things that I want to talk about, because I talked a little bit about earlier on that there's a lot of different ways to do this. And my goal is that everybody kind of finds a way to plug this into their business if they want to. But this is the biggest need in the marketplace. And I kind of want to show you the other side, right? Because maybe your business model is more like Cynthia and Lois. Because Cynthia and Lois, they joined Noteschool in the beginning of 2020, right when I joined the teaching team. And they did over 20 deals their first year, right? Which is pretty dang impressive. But what's cool is because one of them's retired and one of them works full-time, like real full-time. But their business goals are a little bit unique in that, yes, they want to do deals, they want to build wealth, but they really want to transform a community where they live in Houston. So there's this one pocket of Houston that they basically said, hey, we want to own this part of Houston. This is our community. We're going to revitalize it. We're going to help change it. We want to give people some second chances that really aren't being given second chances and that kind of stuff. And they were buying rentals all these years for the last, I think it's like 8 years or 12 years or something like that. It's been a while. They were slowly buying rental property, but then they got introduced to Noteschool, and that's when they realized, hey, I can have more secure cash flow. I can get more, more stable cash flow, and also have a lot less risk by playing the role of the bank than obviously playing the role of the landlord, because the bank doesn't have to pay for roof repairs, heating repairs, air conditioning, that kind of stuff. And they're going to use these techniques to go out and help this community achieve homeownership one person at a time. And the way they're going to do this is they're going to resell these properties using seller financing to a penalty box buyer. And this is the other side I'm talking about. So this is Sandra. She's their penalty box buyer, right? This is an asset to where they're going to resell it to this person. And tell me if you can kind of understand this, right? Sandra is a penalty box buyer who she works at the Postal Service. So she's got a good job. She's been working there a long time. She's got good income and everything. But a couple of years ago, she had some medical things that really messed up her financial picture, right? And this is a part of life. This happens to tons of people every single year, where a medical event happens that just wrecks someone financially, or something else can wreck you financially. And so because of that happened, it took her several years to start building things back. And she's back on her feet and she's paying rent and everything else, right? And she's got a good track record, but she's not exactly looked at by banks as lendable. She doesn't check the qualified mortgage borrower box, right, with Bank of America and Wells Fargo. So they're not going to give her a mortgage. But that doesn't really mean she's not lendable. It just means she doesn't qualify with them. Well, this is what's kind of interesting, is that Cynthia and Lois said, well, you're plenty qualified for us, because if you've been paying rent the past 2 and 3 years on time every single month, that's a pretty big deal. Not to mention your rent payment's going to be higher than what your mortgage payment's going to be. And so if you've been paying that, you'll probably pay this. But again, they're just trying to simply find a way to help this lady while also making money. Don't worry, they're not going to have to give up. Like, this isn't charity. They resold the house at $145,000 and she had $4,000 down. Now, $4,000 down is not 20% down, but it's also not a security deposit. So it's good enough for what Cynthia and Lois are trying to do. It's an $891 a month cash flow for 30 years, meaning that Cynthia and Lois are going to be able to help this person, help Sandra get into this house, have a pride of home ownership, and be able to move forward with this next chapter of her life. And they're making like really great money, obviously, doing it. And I'm hoping what you're seeing in this is that this is way bigger than just doing one deal and making some money. If you're somebody who your business model is really built around creating some positive change in some people's lives, or in your life, or in a community, or whoever you're trying to help, is your business model equipped with the right strategies to actually go out and make those things happen, right? That's kind of the concept. And so really with Cynthia and Lois, they were able to do this with Sandra, but they were able to do it because they figured out that this really can be simple, but with some help, right? And that's kind of the whole concept behind this Noteschool approach, is that we can show you that a lot of these strategies are simple with some help. We just need to help you understand basically how to get out there and help these sellers get something that's going to work for them. We're going to identify maybe some opportunities that can create some huge profits today and pay some passive cash flow on the side. It's ultimately about setting up that bank, finding that penalty box buyer, that's the easiest part right now, and create a rock solid note that you can obviously have that income coming in, right? So this is what it looks like. So essentially, you're talking to sellers, you're buying deals, you're reselling them and creating your own note, right? On Saturday, we spent a lot more time talking about notes, but this is really the biggest need in the marketplace. I'm showing you not just how to acquire more deals, I'm showing you increased exit strategies as well, that one, have a lower risk profile, as well as a more profitable outcome in most cases, right? And some tax advantages that go with it, right? And so now that we've talked about creating our own notes, this is now that you understand kind of that whole process, you understand how a seller finance note is created. Now I could talk about what does it look like to just say, forget all that stuff. I just want to buy the note from somebody who's already done all that stuff. I just want to buy a performing note. I want to be the bank. I want to be an investor, and don't make me do the work. Truly make me passive, right? That's what performing notes is all about. And this is really what this walks through, is just this concept of you're going to take an asset that's maybe you're going to start with the value, $48,000. The value makes up two things: the debt and the equity. We're buying the debt, which would be the mortgage. The equity tells us what our risk is, right? So in this case, this is an asset that's 65% loan to value, right? So if you talk to a hard money lender, they'll loan you at 70, 75%, maybe somewhere around there. Bank of America will loan you 80% loan to value. And so you're sitting here thinking, okay, 65% is a little lower risk. That's good. But the other part is these are strategies you can do also in some tax advantage accounts like IRAs, but you have this note. And when you're buying a note, what you're doing is you're buying the right to receive those future payments. So if there's 203 payments, that's essentially what you're buying. Okay. Now, if you bought this note, this is really important. If you bought this note for $31,312, do you know what your rate of return would be? It would be 10%, because that's what the note is written at. But notes are bought and sold at a discount. This is the beautiful part about this whole thing. So every single month, if you bought this note up to 203 months, you would receive this payment every single month until you've received all of your money and all of your interest, which would be $64,000. But what's cool is, because you're going to buy it at a discount, it changes the model up a little bit. Instead of paying $31,000, you're going to buy it for $24,000. Right? Which means that it got dropped down to a 50% investment to value instead of a loan to value, right? Your money compared to the value, which means lower risk. And ultimately, you're going to make a 14% return on investment, tax-free in this case, because it's in an IRA. But this is the beautiful part, is you are identifying a note that says, oh, this is a $31,000 note that's owed. I can buy it for 24. I'm buying it at a discount and I get a good return, right? That's the concept behind this. You sit back and you collect that money, right? We haven't even talked about the fact that, again, this person's already been paying for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. They're probably going to keep paying. On Saturday, I go into a little bit more of that. But I'm always curious to find out a little bit more about the type of investors that are a part of the RIA, because if we were in person, I would definitely ask this question, but I'm going to kind of speed it up for the essence of time, since I only got about 10 minutes left. So we have some time for Q&A. 14% return on investment is really good, right? And if you're not okay with 14% interest, let me show you this, because I get to be the one to introduce it to you, but you're going to hear it a ton. Partials are like pizza pies. And what do I mean by this? This is one of those Eddieisms again, right? So let's talk about this for a second, because if a pizza costs $6 to make, how do you make money on it, right? I could box it up and sell it for 10 bucks, 12 bucks, 15 bucks, right? I could sell it for more. Or if you've ever been to a pizza shop in your life, you know that you can sell it by the slice, right? $2 a piece. By the time you've sold the front half of the pizza, you've got all your money back, and the back part of the pizza is yours. You can eat it, you could throw it away, you could also sell it, you can do whatever you want, right? But in this case, partials are like pizza pies, because we're going to do this with a note. Right. See, the key to this is, when Eddie learned this, he was told by his father-in-law, Mr. Shoemake, who taught him this business: if you want to make a lot of money in the note business, like a lot of money, you got to learn how to buy long and sell short. Buy long meaning buy the whole note and then sell the front half of the pizza, or the front chunk of the pizza. Right. So what this looks like is, if there's 203 payments, there are a lot of passive investors out there who say, look, I want to buy one of these notes. I like the idea that this person's been living there and paying for all these years. And I like the risk profile. And I like that the longer I'm in a note, the lower my risk goes, because the property might go up in value and the mortgage is being paid down at the same time. So my risk gets lower and lower and lower every single time, right? Every single month. What's cool about that is you can go and talk to those people and say, great, I'll wholesale you a note. I'll sell you a note. But you could also say, hey, instead of doing that, what if I could bring you a note, and instead of being in a 20-year note by yourself, you actually it's more like you'd be partnering with me. So I'll buy the whole note and you're going to buy the front section of the loan. So I'll let you basically have a chunk of the loan for maybe 10 years or 12 years or 15 years, right? And the reason you would do this is twofold. One, it's a shorter time frame if that's attractive to you. Two, I am going to let you keep all of the payments first, and you'll receive 100% of your principal and 100% of your interest before I get any of the cash flow. This is important because this is a pretty good incentive structure. And then the third thing is this, that if anything goes wrong, because I don't get my money till the end, I'm going to go and step in if something goes wrong, and I'm going to be the one with the knowledge anyway to solve the problem. I'll take care of it. Like if they stop paying or something goes wrong. Okay. And so would you be interested in that? And what you're going to see is, not only are they more interested in that, it's also easier to get cheaper and cheaper money, because you're continuously removing more and more risk. And so in this case, this note happened to be sold a partial at 10%, and we sold 120 months. So we sold 10 years of these payments, right? So you had 203 payments. We sold the first 10 years for, oops, not on the screen, for $24,063. So this is your partial passive investor. This is another investor who's partnering with you, so to speak, who every single month for the first 10 years they're going to put up that 24 grand, and every single month they're going to get the payment of 318. They're going to get all the payments first. You're going to see why this is so important. You're going to give them all the payments first and all the interest. And once they've received all 10 years of payments, they'll have been paid in full. They'll put up their 24 grand. They'll have made back 38,000, and they're done. Right. And so meanwhile, you've sold the first 10 years, you waited 10 years, and then you get the backside of it. Right. Well, what does that mean for you? Well, if you sold the first 120 months, that means you get to keep the back 83 months. But here's what's cool. Remember, you sold the front half of the note for 24,000. You bought the whole note for 24,425, which means you only now have $362 left in it. Your passive investor gets taken care of first, right? And the cool part about notes is they very rarely go to term, meaning go all 203 months, right? They're going to refinance or pay off or sell between 8 and 10 years typically, right? Most articles are going to say between 5 to 9 years. The reason you would do this is if you want to grow your wealth, like if you want to make a lot of money, this is probably the best way to do it, because you could have kept this note yourself and made 14% interest, or you could have done this, sold a partial, and for that $362, you would have made 26 grand. So what kind of return on investment would that be? If you put up $362, you put up the 24 grand, you get all of it right back, right, that next month. And now you got $362 in a deal that you're going to get, a dozen or more $1,000 in the future. The bottom line is at Noteschool, we just say, if you don't need a calculator, that return on investment's enough, right? So this is the concept of partials that we talk about more on Saturday. And I could show you how, yes, even with this strategy, because this happened to be done in an IRA, this was a tax-free deal. So this was $362 that I had in an IRA, make $26,000 on tax-free, a very high return, higher than 14%, right? But this is an absolutely fascinating concept. I'll show you how you can use this to even make some money today, make some money tomorrow, do both, hodgepodge of different things, right? So I kind of want to wrap up with this. Now that you've seen how we can acquire more deals, you can create your own notes. You can just simply go wholesale a note, go buy a note like this and wholesale, buy a note and hold it, buy a note and sell a partial. The bigger conversation for Saturday is going to be this one. What would it look like to buy bad debt, right? There's millions and millions of loans that are in trouble right now, right? Millions of loans, record high. And we'll talk about some of those stats on Saturday. But the bottom line is, if you can take, like I said earlier, an ugly house and you can fix it up to make it really pretty and manageable and all this kind of stuff, you flipped it, make it look all HGTV-like, and then sell it for a profit, we can do the same thing with a note. You can take a troubled note, which is simply a note that's not paying. You can rehab it, add value to it in some form or fashion, and then that makes it more valuable. And now you can obviously go and do a hodgepodge of different things with it. You could wholesale that note. You could hold on to that note. You could sell a partial of the note, all kinds of stuff. And on Saturday, I'll show you why this strategy for 2021 is something you have to learn before June 28th. You have to learn this before this eviction and foreclosure moratorium comes up, because so many people are going to need help. So many people are going to need help that you can be the one that steps in and plays basically doctor. And you say, hey, look, I want to modify this mortgage. I want to get you back on track. I want to give you a second chance. And for doing so, I'm going to be rewarded handsomely. And I'll show you some case studies on Saturday that walk you through how flexible this can be, how much control you really have in the non-performing notes, and why this one strategy allowed Eddie to double his net worth in a 2 to 5 year time frame. Like, it's pretty crazy. And the reason I'm talking about this is because right now you're fixing and flipping houses, you're buying rentals, you're doing something, right? And you've got some margins that are working, right? Let's say you bought it at 30 cents on, or 70 cents on the dollar, 30% discount. This model works for you, right? You're able to make money, pay for all this stuff, wholesale it, whatever your strategy is, you're finding a way to make money with this works. All I'm saying is with non-performing notes. By going into the deal through the paper side of the real estate, non-performing notes are bought at a substantially bigger discount. So if you could buy this same asset for 55 cents on the dollar instead of 70 cents on the dollar, all because you came to the non-performing note side, you either are going to have a cash flowing asset, or if they don't want to cooperate or things don't work out, you always have the ability to take back the property as yours. And we're going to talk about why on Saturday, how foreclosure works, why it's not this big scary thing that a lot of people think that it is, and why this becomes a very virtual business, because you can go to where the deals are. You're never actually going to need to see the properties or anything like that. So this is really kind of a big conversation for Saturday. This is a Wolf Street article that came out in March that was really just talking about just FHA mortgages, just the delinquencies on FHA mortgages, not Fannie or Freddie or anybody else, just FHA. 17.5% are delinquent. So when you look at that on a chart that they have in this article, this is before COVID, this is after COVID. The bottom line is something's about to happen, right? We know that something's about to happen because you can't just keep going without people paying, right? People are behind. Some people are going to get caught up. Some people are going to pay off their mortgage. Some people are going to need a second chance and they're going to need some help, right? I'm going to show you the accounting process and timeline for why it's going to be an opportunity for us and why the banks aren't going to deal with it, why they're going to partner with the hedge funds, and the hedge funds give us an opportunity that really nobody else has, right? That's what makes it really, really cool. So as I kind of wrap up, I'll kind of tell you a little bit more about Saturday, and then we'll have about 10 minutes left for some Q&A, which will be good. But basically, this is the next step: is you've got to come to this Saturday class, and some of you need to learn just how to get terms that a bank won't agree to. Some of you need to learn how to pay retail for properties. Some of you are brand new. Like I said, you need to figure out this deal architecting. How can I start in the marketplace by simply serving these other investment groups that are already established and simply closing the leads that they're not closing, right? If they don't have creative financing as a part of their model, you can provide a massive value, right? And then on Saturday, we have a lot more time to unpack the note side of the business, which I think will be fascinating to anybody who likes the idea of being the bank and not having tenants and toilets and turnover. If I could show you how to keep the exact same return on investment, maybe even better, but I could take away tenants and toilets and turnover, would you be interested in what that could look like? I think you're going to find out the same thing that I did, which is it's actually what I was after in the first place. I just didn't know it existed. I was buying rental properties for the reason of passive income, but you buy enough rental properties and you find out it's maybe not as passive as you thought it was going to be, right? So come check out this class. It's Saturday, May 15th. It is Pacific time. We're doing this class for you guys on the Pacific Coast, 9 to 3:30. To be able to get involved. We spend a whole day really going through case studies, kind of showing you step by step how it works. So you get a better, the case studies allow you to see kind of how things work. That makes it a little bit easier. We talk about this logical, rational talk about how do we get them to say yes? How do we get them to say yes to seller financing? How do we get them to say yes to 0% or no money down, or whatever the term is that is important to you. We'll talk about wholesaling notes. We'll talk about performing notes, partials, non-performing notes. We're going to talk a lot about this stuff. We have a whole day, obviously, to get it done. And just for showing up, I'm actually going to give you 2 books now. One of them is the Moneyball 2 book, which is a creative financing book, how to do creative financing basically during a pandemic, right? And why this is such a big deal today. And then the red one is Making Money from the Post Meltdown, which is all about non-performing debt and why it is cyclical and predictable what's going to happen, right? What's nice about Eddie is he's been through so many market cycles over the years, and he has everything mapped from each one that he can say, look, each time the banks get bailed out, each time this is where they move their assets, each time this is, I mean, it's kind of fascinating to be able to see somebody with that much experience and 50,000 deals. He's tested this stuff. It works, right? We go into a lot more of this kind of stuff. And so I'll leave you with this. Outside of talking about the niches all day, I want to show you something that's kind of a passion project for me, because some of you are in a business position. Everybody listen to this for the next 45 seconds, because I think it's going to be important to you. Everybody gets so focused on making money right now that they don't build their wealth, and that's fine. Please hear me. I'm not here to tell you, you need to focus on your future. No, you got to figure out, are you money today? Are you money tomorrow? For anybody who's money today, please just understand there's something that I totally didn't understand until literally I joined the teaching team of Noteschool, that I realized, oh my gosh, I've just never thought about putting these things together. On Saturday, I'm going to show you how to take $100 and turn it to $100,000 tax-free doing one note deal. Okay. And the reason I'm telling you this is because if you really need to focus on your money today and you don't have time to focus on your wealth deal, you're building your wealth. I mean, take $100, invest it in your future, right? $100, go sell something on Facebook or eBay, like before Saturday, come up with $100 and I'll show you how to turn that into $100,000 from that one deal. Now you have time to go back and focus on your money today. This is a strategy you can implement using notes that works incredibly well. And it really allows the person who needs the money now to focus on money now, but get this one deal to be working in the background and let it grow for you over the years, right? You'll see on Saturday how powerful this can be. I've always said Noteschool is the Harvard of the note business, right? Like they are like top notch as far as what they teach. And I've just learned so much. And as I've implemented it and started to master some of this stuff, I just get so passionate and excited to be able to share it with others. And, you know, Eddie lets me come out and teach every now and then. And so I really enjoy that. And so I'd encourage you to come to the class. Here's how you can get signed up. It is $29 for the whole class, right? I'm sorry that's not on the slide. I guess I forgot to put it on the last one, but it's $29 for the entire class. You can go to noteschool.com/ORRIA and get signed up. You've got to be able to register. And by going to that link, it'll kick you back the GoToWebinar links. And here's the thing, right? The thing is this: on Saturday is supposed to be a very interactive day. So bring your questions, bring your business problems. The nice part about Saturday is I'm able to go a lot slower. Obviously, I feel like I'm talking about 1,000,000 miles an hour. But come on Saturday and we'll be able to slow things down, really spend some time answering your questions. I've gotten to teach some classes enough to where I have a pretty good understanding of what a lot of people are going to ask. So hopefully I'll address a lot of your questions in the teaching. But hey, I want to hear it. If I'm not covering something, let's make sure you leave there with those answers. And so hopefully you learned a little something tonight. Like I said, this is kind of part one of a 2-part series that allows me on Saturday to really get into more of it. But I hope this is valuable to you. I hope this is something you can plug in and make happen. And ultimately, hope to see you on Saturday.
Thank you, Brian. I have to tell you, my pulse rate is up to 100. I'm so excited. One of those watches, you know. And I also want to tell you a short little story. I was in 2015, I think it was, I was at a national RIA kind of convention on notes, basically, that they were putting on in California and LA. And it was the most amazing experience for me because I would have breakfast with different people, lunch with different people, dinner with different people. And I have to say, at least 5 times I would say to somebody, like, they were very wealthy, these people. One was the one that started National RIA. And I said, wow, how did you learn all that? I mean, wow, you were amazing. And every time the answer was Eddie Speed.
Yeah.
Eddie Speed. So I joined Noteschool in November 2016. And I used to be on there every day, and things changed in my life and stuff like that. I almost got divorced and that kind of stuff. So I am excited to get back. I'm super excited to get back. Yes. And I want to tell everybody, I think you all know that you can go to the Oregon RIA website. Please do and join this Saturday class. And Brian, it's $29 for members and $49 for non-members for Saturday.
Oh, that's great. Okay, for whatever reason, this is the link I had in the notes. Okay, ignore this link then. Go to Oregon RIA. Go to the website. I apologize about that, Grace. For whatever reason, this is what I had down.
We had a little bit of a thing, you know, between who was going to be speaking today and all that. So then I finally gave up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know a lot of people at Noteschool, and Brian, you're new to me. You joined about the time I joined, it sounds like, but you're a go-getter, man. You are like, wow, you're a wildfire.
Listen, I mean, it really is exciting stuff. And I'll say it again on Saturday. It seems like this is like become almost like my catchphrase. is people are like, you're so passionate about this stuff. You get so excited. I'm like, I am. Like, it really did change my business a lot, you know, to sell your rental properties and exit the thing that's building your wealth. Like, it takes some convincing, right? And but the thing is, like, my passion will never put profit in your pockets. And so you've got to go out, you've got to learn this stuff. You've got to put it in your brain, and then you got to go out and make it happen. And you can have the similar results. I mean, it's cool.
It's a great group of people too at Noteschool. I mean, I've met several students and all that kind of stuff, going to conventions and all that. And I'm so excited. My dream was always to bring Noteschool to Oregon RIA, our tiny little club. And wouldn't you know that COVID made it happen? And when I texted you today, I was picturing you arriving, coming to your hotel room. Just like, but I'm so glad.
Hey, this virtual thing, this virtual thing is cool. I have got family up in Oregon. I actually used to have family in Bend. Like, I think that's on the other side of the mountain, though. Or I'm sorry, they used to live in Eugene. They now live in Bend, is what I'm saying. But next time we go up there, I like to just go and sit outside. It's just, you have the most beautiful state in the world. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, we do.
How nice it is up there.
Yeah. Right. We got to get out there every day out in the nature, don't we, guys? All right. So you guys, please, I have 3 registrations now for Saturday. Please do register for Saturday. If you register and you need to watch it later, if those who are registered, paid for, I will send you a video link for Saturday. Okay. Because I know we Oregonians like our Saturdays.
That's
awesome. Is that good, Brian? Is that all right? Mike,
yeah.
Mike,
you got a question, Mike?
Unmute yourself.
Just to be clear, so we go to the OREA website and register for this class, yes?
It's in the chat. Yes, there's a link. There's a link in the chat right now.
Oh, good for you. Thank you, Brian. Man, I'm not used to that kind of help.
Oh, it wasn't even me. It was somebody else.
Oh.
Can't even take credit for this.
Oh, it's Stephanie. Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, cool.
Stephanie, our awesome attorney. I never thought I'd use those 2 words together.
It's lovely. And anybody else that has questions, this is your chance.
Well, you'll probably have some before then, so bring them on Saturday for sure. Again, with it being a little bit more interactive, we'll make sure we get them answered. We'll help you get confident in it.
Right. So as you know, I video this. I did record it. It'll be available tomorrow. All you do is go to the website, go to today's class, click, go to today's class, and then scroll down, and you'll be able to find the link to the YouTube. All right. It was a lot. I understand it was a lot. So if you want to watch it again, feel free. If you want to recommend it to others, feel free. Okay. It's like it's like drinking from a fire hose. I know. I do know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No. All right.
Cool.
Wait,
well,
Brian, will we have chance for? I'm sure. I mean, because I've been around corporate for a while. There's gonna be some kind of follow up after this. Like, let's say a month later, I got questions about Noteschool. I'll be able to contact people or something, or what?
I mean, you can either come to another class and bring all this. I mean, it's easier for me to teach a group of people answering your question than it is to, you know what I mean, do a one-on-one email 16 times, right? Yeah. Or 50 times. So I always encourage people, yeah, if you need to come back to a class or something like that, we can absolutely help you with that. All right, cool. Well, Grace, I'll touch base with you here later in the week, and we'll make sure we get everybody registered and on track. And we'll see y'all on Saturday.
See you Saturday morning. All right. Thank you so much, Brian. I'm so excited.
Thank you, Brian.
Hey,
thank you.
Thank you. A lot of great information.
Love it. You guys are welcome. We'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.